Thanks. You can be seated. We're Mother's Day, and typically on Mother's Day, we talk about, in Proverbs, commonly you're going to hear a message on Proverbs 31. And we're going to talk about the virtuous woman. That's actually an acrostic of what a godly woman looks like. There's a little bit of debate on who actually wrote that. I'm going to go with Lemuel, and we'll talk about him in a second. Some people say it's an anonymous author, but that's typically where we focus on Mother's Day, is on that passage. The book of Proverbs is part of the Old Testament that we call wisdom literature. And there are a number of books in the Old Testament that fall in that category of wisdom literature. Proverbs is one. Proverbs is a book on wisdom for success. And so a lot of times when we look at the wisdom literature books, that's one that we go to, and it's just packed full of all kinds of stuff. Then we get to the book of Ecclesiastes, which is really a book about wisdom for frustration, and it talks about just the frustrations of life and how we handle that. And then we get to Job, and the book of Job really gives us what we call wisdom for suffering, for difficulty, for hardship, for struggle. And so we have those three books in the Old Testament kind of give us some really good concepts as far as how to live a smart, wise, good kind of life. This morning, we're going to look at Proverbs 31, but we're going to look at the part of Proverbs 31 nobody talks about. And we're going to learn, and as soon as we start reading it, you're going to go, well, how in the world does this impact us on Mother's Day? And yet, I think it is probably one of the most important passages for moms and parents and grandparents on parenting advice that we have in the Bible. So this morning, we're going to look at Proverbs 31, and it's actually a book, so Proverbs 31 is the key chapter in the whole book of Proverbs. All right? And it focuses on a guy by the name of Lemuel. Now, we don't know who King Lemuel is. Some people think it's Solomon. Some people think it's Hezekiah. Some people think it's a king out of northern Arabia. Some people think it's a Chaldean king who has a Jewish background. We just don't know. But his name is Lemuel. And here's what we know about him. He's a king, and he's got a mom. And as he was growing up, his mom gave him some advice. And he records that advice that his mom gave him at the beginning of Proverbs 31. So we're going to read it. Then we're going to understand it, and then we're going to apply it. And we're going to apply it to parents. We're going to apply it to grandparents. We're going to apply it to the kids. And we're going to learn some things that if we are going to raise a successful generation, we need to be doing. Okay? So here we go. We're going to start it. Proverbs 31. The sayings of King Lemuel. An inspired utterance his mother taught him. Listen, my son. Listen, son of my womb. Listen, my son, the answer to my prayer. So this is a kid that she's prayed for. First piece of advice. Do not spend your strength on women, your vigor on those who ruin kings. First piece of advice, son, be careful of women. Now you know why nobody preaches on this on Mother's Day. But let's understand the context. He's a king. As a king, women are going to be throwing themselves at him. Dads are purposely going to be throwing their daughters at him. He is in a world in which he can have any woman that he wants. And if he wants more than one woman, that's okay too, because kings had concubines and girlfriends and wives, and they just racked them up, as many as they could get. That was the culture. Having your daughter married to a king was beneficial to your family. It was beneficial to your country. It was beneficial to everybody in your orbit of people. So his mom looks at him and says, be careful here. You know what she's saying to him? Don't make your kingdom about you. You be really careful, Lemuel, in realizing that you are a king. Ultimately, she's going to tell him, you are a king to help other people, not to benefit from you yourself all the time. So you need to be careful when it comes to this issue of women because, A, they're going to be expensive. They're going to cost you a lot of time, energy, and effort to maintain them, to keep them happy, to do all of these things, and your kingdom is not about what you're going to get out of it. So be careful here, son. Good advice. Now, she goes to number 2. It is not for kings, Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for rulers to crave beer, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed, and deprive all the oppressed of their rights. Let beer be for those who are perishing, wine for those who are in anguish. Let them drink and forget their poverty and remember their misery no more. She says, number 2, Lemuel, you need to stay away from the alcohol. Because you see, in this culture, alcohol was used primarily for people in pain, for people who wanted to forget their circumstances, for people who were on the last legs of their life. And she says, look, Lemuel, there are people who need that. You need to stay away from it. You need to stay away from it because it's going to impair your decision-making process. And there's going to be people who come to you who need a sober king. And if you're not sober, you're not going to be able to help them. And you're going to forget things that you have promised, and you're going to forget things that you've done. So Lemuel, you need to set some boundaries, and you need to stay away from certain things. And other people may do it, but you don't. That's what she said. Because she said, look, if you're not careful, this is going to hurt you as a king. You're not going to be able to do your job. So Lemuel, you need to say no to some things, and you need to set some boundaries. I don't think we need to have a long discussion about how alcohol affects decision-making processes. We have all watched lives that have been wrecked by it. I have, and I'll be honest, I've been a pastor now 40 years. I've buried a lot of people. I've been around a lot of people when they're getting ready to die. Never have I heard this, Pastor, I just wish I would have drank more. Never. It's never happened. Okay? She looks at Lemuel. She says, look, you need to set some boundaries. And you need to be really careful with the choices you make, because the choices you make have some consequences. So pay attention here, son. And then she goes on and gives him her third piece of advice. Speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. She says, Lemuel, you are there to help other people who can't help themselves. That's your job as king, son. You need to be really careful. Now, there's a lot of Bible scholars. It's really interesting. Bible commentaries have a lot of ideas about what this means. Some people actually, there's one translation which talks about it as destitute, and they actually believe that what that passage is talking about is children who have lost parents. And that in some situations, those children have lost parents and they are destitute and no one can speak for them, and you need to make sure you're taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. That's your job as king. It's not about you and the women that you can get a tally sheet on. It's not about you and the alcohol and having all the fun that you want and not realizing there are consequences of those choices. It's about you being able to help people that can't help themselves. That's why you're a king, son. Then, verse 10, you know what verse 10 is? Who could find a virtuous woman? And that's why I believe he wrote that passage too, but he starts with this. Let me tell you about my mom and the advice she gave me growing up. You want some good parenting advice this morning? Whether you're a parent, whether you're a grandparent, whether you're a great-grandparent, whether you're an aunt, an uncle, a nephew, whatever it is, here's some advice on what we need to teach the generation that we have an opportunity to impact. So let's talk about it practically. First question that we need to wrestle with, and the first principle we need to understand is this. Kids, we need to teach this to our kids. Life is not about you. Lemuel, it's not about you and how many wives and girlfriends you can have. Lemuel, it's not about you. We need to be teaching our kids, it's not about you. That's countercultural. Because we're in a culture which makes it all about the kids. We're in a culture in which the family unit now revolves around the children. And we continually do everything we can about the kids. And we are hurting them by doing that. Because they grow up thinking it's all about them. And Lemuel's mom looks at him and says, look, Lemuel, it's not about you. So you be really careful if you're going to be king. You want to prepare your kids for a real world and a life that God intended for them to have? We have to start teaching them it's not about them. And you need to understand, everything in our culture is geared this way. Even our educational system. Talk to any teacher. You know what they have to deal with now? ILP, Individualized Learning Plan. We're going to tailor-make education just for you. We're going to do everything just for you. I'm not against it. I understand. We have kids who have to have it. But we have a lot of kids who that's a cop-out, and we're doing that because they won't get with the program. Why? Because we're in a culture which says it's all about you. Oh, we don't want you to feel bad. Here's a ribbon for showing up. Do you remember, those of you who are like me, do you remember the days on track and field day? There were 6 ribbons. And you know what? Only 6 kids got them. Everybody else got nothing. Why? You learned real quick. It wasn't about you. This is the culture we're in, folks. And we're not helping our kids when we make it all about them. Again, as a grandparent, here's how we do it. I'm just going to share with you what our family does, okay? How we're trying to combat some of it. We go on a family vacation every year, all of us, 10 people, ages a little under 2 all the way to 60 plus. I got to go home when this is over, so we ain't going there. We have a rule that the vacation is not just about the kids. The vacation is for everybody. So everybody gets to choose one thing to do. And everybody has to do it. And there is no whining allowed. You have to do it. You can't complain about it. I have done things on family vacation I didn't want to do because I have a grandson who goes, I want to go to Reptile Garden. I am so tired of Reptile Garden. If you've seen one lizard, you've seen them all. I mean, one snake, you've seen them all. You know what? We go to Reptile Garden every year because one of the grandkids wants to go to Reptile Garden. And you know what? I don't complain. I go, I have the best time I can, and it's not about me. And we do that as a family, and that's the way we've done it through the years because we've learned this principle that, look, we have to start teaching our kids. It's not about you. Oh, I don't want to do that, Grandpa. Oh, excuse me, are you whining? Are you breaking Grandpa's rule? You don't get a whine. We're all doing it. Me too. So get on the train. Here we go. We've got to get to this. Look. We're in a world in which we make it all about them. And we're not helping them. We're not helping them. Second principle, Lemuel's mom. The whole wine thing. You are going to have to understand, son, choices have consequences. And there's a consequence if you're going to drink. And it's not good for your kingdom. You need to be better than that. You need to be better than that. You need to set some boundaries. You need to say, this is what I'll do, this is what I won't do. Look, I don't think I have to tell you that in a rural community, there is an alcohol issue here. And you want to know who's to blame for most of this? The adults. Well, are you saying, you can't drink at all? I'm not saying that. But I'm saying, understand this, choices have consequences. Choices have consequences. And we are in a culture which minimizes the consequences to our kids. We try to soften everything. And we are not helping our kids when we do that. I was teaching 30 years ago in a school. I had parents 30 years ago who would help do kids' homework. They would write notes and go, you know what, they were late because of this, and it was all a lie. I had parents who would run interference. Oh, you can't give them that grade because, they just didn't understand. They were working so hard. And I don't care. He didn't do the homework. He did. My kids learned. If you forgot, when you got to be 16 and you were driving to school, if you forgot something, it was a wasted phone call to call me. Oh, but you don't understand. This is like the third time without my PE uniform. And if I don't have my PE uniform, I'm going to fail the class and I might have to go to summer school. Better sign up now then, son. Why? At 16, if they can't bring their clothes to PE, or they can't bring their assignment to class, or they can't remember something, what do you think is going to happen when they're trying to get a job or they're in a career and they can't do that? And we're in a culture where we soften everything for these kids. We run interference for these kids. One of my favorite movies is Remember the Titans. I don't know if you've ever seen Remember the Titans, okay? Part of this because my wife has some history here with the schools. But anyway, in this thing, Coach Boone, Coach Boone and Coach, I just forgot his name. I got it on the next slide. Bill Yost, Coach Yost. It's when they integrated the black kids and the white kids, they put them together, put them on a football team, and as they were going through the whole practice and everything else, what would happen is Coach Boone would go and he would chew these kids out up one side and down the other. Coach Yost felt sorry for him. So he would come along behind him and go, that's okay, son, you were doing really good. I know he's really hard on you, but that's okay. And there's a scene in the office between these two that I cannot stress this enough. Here's what he says. I can't do it word for word because there's a little cussing in there, but here's what he said. Now, I might be a mean cuss, but I'm the same mean cuss with everybody out there on that football field. The world doesn't care how sensitive these kids are, especially the young black kids. You ain't doing these kids a favor by patronizing them. You're crippling them. You're crippling them for life. Moms and dads, hear me. When you run interference for your kids, you're crippling them. You're crippling them for life. Because there's going to come a point as they get older, nobody's going to run interference for them anymore, and they're going to take the brunt of all of it. And we need to wake up and realize that we have to start teaching our kids choices have consequences. I think that's why we are where we are right now as a culture. I've heard it from every businessman I know. Can't get people to work. Hire these kids, nobody wants to work. You know why? You want to know who's to blame? We are. You know why? Because here's what we do. When they're 5 years old, we go, you want to play sports? Let's play t-ball. And they play t-ball. And then they get in another sport. And then they get into dance. And they get into theater. And they get into band. And they get into this. And they play their way all the way through elementary. And all the way through junior high. And all the way through high school. And then they get a scholarship to play some more. And they play from 5 to 25. And then we go, now, here's your job. But it's not fun. I don't enjoy it. It's work. Because for 20 years, we've let them play. For 20 years, we've said, this is life. It's a playground. Play, 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 play. And then we're shocked when they get to a job and they can't play and they don't want to do it. And we stand back and go, I don't understand why kids don't want to work today. Because it's not play. We have got to start teaching kids how to prepare them for life, that choices have consequences. You know what? I played sports. I was in theater. I was on the stage all through high school and all through college. I also, from the time I was 16, worked between 15 and 20, 25 hours a week, including all through college. Yeah, but if they work, you don't understand. They don't get to play as much. No, if they work, here's what they're going to have to do. They can still do all of that. But now they're going to have to figure out scheduling, and they're going to have to work with employers, and they're going to have to do all of these kinds of things. Look, I got an 8-year-old granddaughter. She and Alden, we had them last couple of weekends ago while the marriage conference was going on in Lincoln, and so we took 2 of them, and we had them for that weekend. So Saturday afternoon came. We put Alden down for a nap. I looked at Claire, and I said, go get your boots. Go get your coat. Why, Grandpa? Because it's Saturday afternoon. Saturday afternoon, Nana works in the house, Grandpa works on the farm. We're going to work. What are you going to do? Just get ready. I said, make sure you got a pair of gloves, make sure you're warm, make sure you got your boots, get going. I said, we got to trim trees. So I worked ahead of her. I said, you load up the wagon, I'll trim the trees in 4 hours. Now, here was our pile. This pile of branches that we trimmed up is about 75 feet long, about 8 feet tall. You go, she's 8 years old. You making her do that? You betcha I am. Because I'm not going to be out there working, trimming trees while she's sitting inside watching TV. And she worked with me, and she worked with me, and she worked with me. She worked all day. Sunday morning, Jimmy Cockburn and I were in here, and Claire came in for Sunday school. And I said, Claire, I said, Grandpa, I said, I'm so happy you worked so hard yesterday. I said, I'm going to pay you. I said, how much do you think it was worth? Now, again, what am I doing? I'm getting her to value work because she's going to have to do that when she's an adult. What do you think it was worth? Now, she said, Jimmy and I thought she said $45. She said $425. And I heard $45, and Jimmy was like, I'll work for you for that, you know. So anyway, so we're joking back and forth with her and stuff like that. And she said, no, $4 to $5. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, here's what Grandpa's going to do. I said, I'm going to give you $2.50 an hour, and you work for me for 4 hours. I said, when you can tell me how much I owe you, I will pay you. I could have just handed her $10. But what's she learning at school? Math. Now I've got a real world application. So Claire, so at first she goes, well, that would be like, she's trying to do it in her head. So she goes, well, that'd be like $6. I went, $6? I'll pay you $6. Oh, wait a minute, Grandpa. I said, tell you what, you go get a piece of paper, you figure it all out. We got done with the service that Sunday. She walks up to me and hands me a thing. So here's the bill, it's two, and she's got it all written out. She goes, you owe me $10. I said, great. I said, when you get home to my house, I said, it's underneath the paperweight there on the thing. I said, you know, you've earned that. Why? Choices have consequences. I made you work. I want to honor that. You worked hard. I want to give you money for that. She didn't work with the anticipation of money. It just came as a result of a good choice. To not whine and complain about, oh, Grandpa, how come I got to help you, blah, 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 blah. Listen, we have a whole culture who doesn't get that. Are you following this college thing right now, happening on college campuses? Okay, there are certain things that push me over the edge. Okay? I know I'm not supposed to get mad. I'm madder than a hornet over this. Okay? This is a statement by a graduate student at Columbia after they had barricaded themselves in one of the buildings. First of all, they wouldn't leave. Then they barricaded themselves in the building. And then they wouldn't let the police or fire or anybody else in. They took all the desks and chairs, piled them up in front of the thing. This is a graduate student talking to an interviewer about that. Here's what they said. First of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who paid for a meal plan here. The student told reporters when asked about Columbia's role in providing food access for students occupying a campus building, Hamilton Hall. I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic. I mean, it's crazy to say, since we're on an Ivy League campus, that this basic humanitarian aid we're asking for, could you please give us a glass of water? Excuse me? You have barricaded yourself in a building to not let anybody in, and you want them to deliver your meal plan? Starve to death and die. This is insanity. But this person has had at least 4.5 years of college Ivy League education, and this is how they're thinking. We're going to barricade ourselves in a building, and you're not bringing us our meal plan. Don't you care about us? Why? Nobody taught her choices have consequences. You want to barricade yourself in a building? Fine. Barricade yourself in a building, but don't expect other people to take care of you while you do it, because your choice has a consequence. I personally, it's not political. If they have a student visa, if they're arrested and they have a student visa, it should be canceled. If they have any loans or scholarships from the school, it should be canceled. If they have any federal money that they're getting for their education, it should be canceled. You start doing that, let's see how many people keep protesting. Protest all you want, but choices have consequences. And we have a world in which we've raised a generation where choices don't have consequences. And you know what we get? That. And we stand back and go, I just don't understand it. We're to blame. We've never taught these kids choices have consequences. You want to help your kids? Teach them choices have consequences. And follow through with it. Don't soften it. Don't keep softening it and making it easier and easier and easier. Hardship breeds character. That's how we grow. And we're not helping our kids. Like they said, we're crippling them. We're crippling. This is happening at Google. People working during the hours decided to protest, and Google stepped in and goes, you're fired. What do you mean we're fired? Do you mean we can't protest on company time? No. If you want to, fine. Go find someplace else to work for. They've actually turned around and sued Google now. You know why they've sued them? It's discrimination in the workplace for us to have a position that you disagree with. No, it's not discrimination. It's just simply, you're here to do a job. If you're not going to do the job and you want to protest, great, just go work someplace else. Choices have consequences. Lemuel, stay away from alcohol because it will impact your ability to do your job. And then he comes back, and then she comes back to him and tells him the last thing. Lemuel, you need to be compassionate about other people. In essence, what she looks to him is says, you need to respect everybody out there, and you need to look out for people that you can help, who need the help. Parents, listen to me. One of the things we're dealing with in our culture right now is this idea of bullying. And if you have a kid, if you have a grandson who's a bully, I'm going to tell you right now, you'd better start dealing with it. Because, and I understand, there's all kinds of reasons for bullying. It's a learned behavior. It's an emotional thing. There's a whole bunch of, depending on emotional backgrounds and things like that, there's a whole lot of elements to it. I get that. But if you allow them to bully littler kids, older people, people who are different from them, mark my words, that is an issue of respect. And if they don't respect other people, the day will come when they will turn on you. And they will not respect you or your wishes or the things that you want. She looked at Lemuel and said, son, you're going to be in a powerful position to impact people. You look for those who are at the bottom, the least fortunate, and you use your power and your position to help them, not to hurt them. You need to see them differently. You don't need to see yourself as better than them. You need to see yourself as having an opportunity to help them. She tried to develop that tender servant's heart, and Lemuel says, look, this is what I learned from my mom. Parents, moms, dads, grandparents, anybody who has an impact on a kid. 3 things we need to be instilling in this generation. So I end with this idea. His mom offers some great parenting advice to her son. She reminds him to develop a servant's heart that's not about him. She challenges him to set healthy boundaries, to have a compassion for those who are less fortunate. Those 3 characteristics are foundational if we're going to raise a generation that we're proud of. And if nothing else, at least our kids possess those characteristics. Let's pray. Lord, help us. Parenting's tough. But Lord, you have given us these children as a gift. It's our responsibility to guide and direct them. So help us to do that. God, we have a culture that goes against everything we want to try to do. So help us to be creative in finding ways to teach these principles to our kids. May you give us the strength to enforce bad choices and bad consequences. May you help us, Lord, to raise kids in which they understand that the world and life does not revolve around them. And would you help us, Lord, that they should see compassion in the way we treat others so that they can learn to treat others the same way. And Lord, when it is all said and done, may we be able to look at what you have done in and through their lives by using us. And we'll give you the honor and the glory and the praise. These things we ask in your name. Amen. Let's